The screech of tires stopped inches from my knees, and so did the illusion that my family loved me. One moment, I was carrying a tray of lemonade across the front lawn. The next, Aiden's red sports car came roaring toward me, kicking up gravel, the engine howling like it had something to prove. My knees, stiff with age, locked, my heart hammered against my ribs. I stood frozen, watching my own grandson aim a 2-ton machine straight at me like it was a game. The car jerked to a halt so close I could smell the burning rubber. The tray slipped from my hands. I stumbled backward, landing hard on the damp grass. The wind knocked clean from my chest. Laughter erupted from the car. I looked up to see Aiden and his friends grinning through the open windows, their phones raised, recording every second of my humiliation. "Too slow, Grandma," Aiden called out, that handsome face twisted with teenage cruelty. It wasn't until I heard the click of a camera that I realized this wasn't just a prank. It was content. They posted it online. Aiden's video went viral. Strangers laughed at my stumble, my fall, my confusion. They didn't see the woman who once lectured on Shakespeare and taught generations to question power and truth. They just saw an old lady who didn't move fast enough. At dinner that night, I sat quietly, my hands trembling slightly as I picked at my salad. David passed the bread basket like nothing had happened. "Mom," he said, exasperated when I finally brought it up. "You're being dramatic. Aiden would never actually hurt you." Claire didn't even look up from her phone. Not one word, not one glance. "I could have broken a hip," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "But you didn't," David replied. "So let's not make this into a thing, okay?" I used to think love looked like Sunday dinners and shared responsibilities. But lately it felt more like silence, convenient silence, the kind that settles into walls and between people like dust. That night, as I lay in my too-small room, the old storage closet they converted for me after Frank died, I heard them talking in the hallway. "She's getting worse," Claire said. "This whole thing with Aiden, maybe it's a blessing. She might finally agree to the facility. With her pension and the insurance, we could cover it," David added. "And finally update the kitchen." I sat up in bed, the photo of Frank on my nightstand catching the moonlight. His smile so familiar, so steady stared back at me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely alone in my own home. I clutched the photo to my chest. "What do I do now?" I whispered into the dark. Something in me shifted, something quiet but sharp. Not rage, not revenge, but clarity. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. Please like, share, and comment below. Someone out there might need to hear this. The morning after Aiden's so-called prank, I stepped into the kitchen and reached for my purse, determined to go see Joanne. I hadn't visited her in weeks, and I needed someone, anyone, to remind me who I used to be. Someone who remembered me before I became the extra room they had to deal with. "I'm going to visit Joanne today," I said evenly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Claire's reaction was instant. "I don't think that's a good idea. You seem tired." "I can drive myself," I replied. "I've been driving for 60 years. David chuckled without looking up. "Mom, you sold your car last year, remember? You said it was too much responsibility." I stared at him. "No, I didn't." He gave me that patient smile people reserve for the very young or the very old. "Of course you did, right here at this table." But I hadn't. My Volvo had been gone when I came home from the hospital after a bout of pneumonia. No one explained where it went. I just assumed it was parked elsewhere. I never thought to ask until now. "I'll call a taxi," I said, moving toward the hallway. Sweet Emma met me there, phone in hand. "Your phone's still charging, Grandma," she said softly, placing a thick, clunky device in my palm. It wasn't mine. "We got you a new one," Aiden announced from the couch. "Easier to use. No internet. Just calls and texts. We simplified it. No contacts, no browser, no numbers saved. Joanne's number wasn't in it." I stood there blinking, holding a phone that might as well have been a leash. "I think I'll rest after all," I murmured, retreating to the quiet of my room. Later that evening, I went searching for my old address book, tucked inside the small wooden box where I kept my essential documents. But the documents were gone. My financial statements, checkbook, even the deed to the Vermont cottage Frank and I restored every summer, they had disappeared. I confronted David that night after dinner. "Mom," he said with a sigh, "we sold that place 2 years ago. You signed the papers. You said it was too much to manage on your own. I would never have sold that house." You don't remember? That's exactly why we're worried. He placed a hand on my shoulder, the way you might calm a child having a tantrum. Dr. Levine said these episodes would become more frequent. What doctor? I snapped. He blinked. Dr. Levine, you've seen him twice. Remember? But I didn't. Because there was no Dr. Levine. I hadn't had a medical appointment in months. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, unraveling. Photos of Frank were missing from my drawer. Books I loved had vanished. My wardrobe had shrunk. My life was being carefully edited, downsized, repackaged, and simplified for their convenience. Around midnight, Emma knocked gently, slipping into the room without turning on the light. Grandma, are you okay? I heard you pacing. I studied her for a long moment, then whispered, Emma, do you think I'm confused? She looked down the hall, then back at me, her voice barely audible. No, Grandma, but I think they want you to be. Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sudden breathtaking relief of not being alone. 3 days later, Emma came in with a tablet hidden in her sweater. For your old shows, she whispered. But we both knew what it was really for. I waited until the house had gone still. Then I opened the tablet. I hadn't touched one in years, but muscle memory returned like an old friend. I accessed our family's shared cloud, the one David bragged about using for important documents, and there it was, the truth, organized in David's meticulous folders. Scanned bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, emails with banks, doctor's notes from physicians I'd never met, claiming I was showing signs of early dementia. One email in particular made my stomach churn. A message to my brother Charles suggesting I was no longer competent to manage my share of the inheritance. I sat there in the glow of the tablet, my hands steady, my mind sharper than ever. They weren't just waiting for me to decline. They were building the narrative. The next morning, I called Joanne from the library down the block. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. I need your help, I said. She didn't hesitate. Say no more. I know just who you need to talk to. That same week, I met Patrick Hill, a retired prosecutor who now specialized in elder financial abuse. He was calm, precise, and devastatingly thorough. Have you been evaluated recently by a physician you trust? He asked. Yes, I said. Dr. Carter. My actual doctor, not the ones they invented. He coordinated quietly with Dr. Carter, who agreed to conduct a private, independent assessment. I passed every test. When Dr. Carter handed me the results, I felt a piece of myself return the version they tried to erase. You're still in there, I told my reflection that night, and they're going to wish you weren't. I knew what I had to do. I would give them exactly what they expected, an old woman slipping quietly into confusion. But behind the fog, I would be watching, listening, gathering. The performance had begun. The first time I forgot the day of the week on purpose, David looked at me with thinly veiled triumph. He turned to Claire and whispered something that made her smirk into her coffee. They thought the descent had begun. In reality, it was the beginning of my rise. Emma and I met under the guise of afternoon crochet sessions. What we were really doing was orchestrating the quiet dismantling of a lie. She installed screen capture software on David's laptop, justified as a coding project for college. Every time he opened a document with financial terms or my name, it took a screenshot. Meanwhile, I let myself become exactly who they needed me to be: foggy, inconsistent, off. I stopped correcting them when they repeated false events. I misplaced my reading glasses. I forgot names I've known for 50 years. Joanne and Patrick were working in the background, coordinating with Dr. Carter and preparing the legal foundation. But we knew David wouldn't wait. He didn't. One evening, he came home with that slick confidence I recognized from years ago when he sold a startup that never made a profit. Mom, we're going to see a new doctor tomorrow. Just a checkup. Dr. Lewis. I'd heard the name before from Patrick, a physician with a history of signing off on questionable guardianship rulings. The type of doctor people like David counted on. I smiled sweetly. Of course, dear. At the appointment, I kept my act up confused, anxious, fumbling over dates. Dr. Lewis nodded solemnly, scribbling notes. But when he left the room for a moment, I slid an envelope from my purse and placed it carefully on his desk. Inside, a summary of his disciplinary history, complaints from families, and a formal statement from Patrick warning of potential legal scrutiny should his evaluation appear biased. When Dr. Lewis returned, he glanced at the envelope and froze. Need to conduct further tests, he said carefully. Perhaps a second opinion. David's smile faded for the first time in weeks. That night, Emma staged the next step. As Claire prepared dinner, I stood in the middle of the living room and let my voice rise, loud, sharp, deliberate. "You sold my house! You took everything from me! You're lying to everyone!" Claire rushed in, hands raised, eyes darting to the open window. Neighbors peered out from across the street. David grabbed my arm, trying to hush me. "She's having an episode," he hissed, loud enough for the audience to hear. "Then call a doctor," I snapped. "Call Dr. Carter." They did. Within the hour, I was taken to the hospital for evaluation under Dr. Carter's supervision. No sedatives, no tricks. The next morning, he ran a full battery of cognitive tests. "You're sharper than most 60-year-olds, he smiled. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Patrick arrived later with Joanne. They carried files and transcripts, emails and screen captures. The financial picture was grim. Unauthorized withdrawals, forged documents, and email trails confirming intent. "Time to act," Patrick said. That afternoon, police served a limited warrant at David's house, searching for specific financial documents. Not a full raid, but enough to shake the walls. David showed up at the hospital 2 days later, uninvited. He walked in wearing his old high school football hoodie, a smile pasted awkwardly on his face. "Hi, Mom," he began, sitting at the edge of my bed. "There's been a lot of confusion and I just wanted to—" I sat up straighter than I had in months. "You underestimated the wrong woman, David," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I'm your mother. I remember everything." His smile faltered. "You've been pretending?" he asked, voice cracking. "No," I replied. "I've been protecting myself, my dignity, and now it's your turn to be seen for who you really are." He didn't speak again. He left the room slowly, the way someone walks away from a place they thought they controlled. And just like that, the narrative began to shift not in their favor, but in mine. Justice didn't arrive with sirens or breaking news. It came in paperwork, courtrooms, and careful signatures. But it came. David was charged with financial exploitation of an elder, forgery, and abuse of power of attorney. The court didn't sentence him to prison, but to something perhaps more difficult for a man like him: probation, full restitution of the funds he siphoned from my accounts, and a permanent ban from managing anyone else's finances ever again. Claire filed for divorce shortly after. The emails Emma uncovered made it clear. Claire had known. She hadn't forged the papers, but she had benefited from every decision made behind my back. The kitchen renovation she wanted so badly would have been built on the bones of my independence. Aiden, my grandson, who once nearly hit me with his car for a laugh, was offered a restorative justice alternative: community service at a local senior center. At first, I resented it. I wanted more than just service hours. But over time, I heard from the staff. He wasn't phoning it in. He was listening, helping, learning. One Saturday afternoon, months after the court ruling, he knocked on the door of my small apartment. He looked different, older in a way that had nothing to do with age. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice shaking, "but I just wanted you to know. I see you now, and I'm sorry." I nodded. "It's not about whether I forgive you, Aiden. It's about who you choose to be now." That night, I slept soundly. I had moved into a modest senior apartment, just one bedroom, a kitchenette, and a balcony that overlooked the community garden. But more important than the view was the door. It locked from the inside, and the key was mine. Emma visited often. She helped me set up my new bank account, taught me how to use my phone without restrictions, and helped organize my files this time with my full permission. With Joanne's legal mind and Patrick's guidance, we started something called Silver Voices. What began as a small circle of elders who had experienced financial manipulation grew into a statewide network, then national. We hosted workshops, gave talks at libraries and community centers, and helped others recognize the warning signs of subtle control. I was invited to speak at a university conference on elder advocacy. Standing at the podium, I scanned the crowd: social workers, students, caregivers. Emma sat in the front row, beaming. Aiden was beside her, taking notes. And in the back, near the door, stood David. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. As I ended my talk, I said, "Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's a choice, but trust must be earned." I left the stage to a standing ovation, not because I had performed, but because I had survived and, more importantly, reclaimed. I didn't look back. I looked ahead toward Emma, toward the audience, toward the people I hadn't yet met who might be fighting a quiet battle of their own. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, share it. You never know who's quietly watching, quietly surviving, and waiting for hope.